Good morning. It is Monday, the last day of March. Can you believe it's already going to be April? Wild, 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 wild. Well, anyway, I got my co-host, Coach Rob, and
Good.
I've been lazy about messaging back a few writers to get on the podcast. I'll get back up on with having some interesting guests. Life's just been wild lately, and Coach, I'm reading this book right now that's about discipline, and it's basically, the book is titled "You Have No Honor If You Have No Discipline," and it talks about creativity as motivation, and motivation kind of helps you get the ball rolling, but without determination to continue doing anything, you have nothing. So, not that it's that I have a lack of uh discipline as of right now, just my life is wild, and I guess I will share more about it when the storm passes. But anyway, that was really random compared to what I was trying to just introduce yourself.
Excuse me. I think it's powerful. We say with our clients all the time, if you wait for motivation, you won't get much started, and you certainly won't get much accomplished. Success always comes from discipline. It's doing things that you don't want to do, and we actually say with our coaches, when you get to the point that you're doing things that you don't like, that's where the work and the improvement essentially begins. Anybody can show up when it's easy. Anybody can show up when it's convenient, et cetera, et cetera. But that's why we always say we start with discipline. And that's why we're very big on time management, because the bottom line is I cannot outwork you and you cannot outwork me. And none of our listeners can outwork each other. There's only 24 hours in the day. And so it's not what you do, it's the leverage you get out of the work that you put in. So it's like you putting out these different types of videos that you put out. Think about how diversified they are, whether it's the week in moto, in the two-wheeled world, whether it's a track walk, whether it's a reaction show, whether it's this live show. And, when you think about that, you have a lot of different options, but how many people are only putting out one podcast a week? And even that is not high quality. You put out numerous videos a week that's got graphics, and you've got a lot of depth and a lot of insight. And I'm sure there's times you're tired, but you just stay disciplined and you stay on the straight and narrow. So I think it's very interesting.
Well, I think that's good for the sport too, is because these guys, again, they do 33 races a year, and especially when you're not doing well, what's your motivation to continue to work and do well, and that's why I've kind of been for a smaller series and everything, because I want to see these guys. Because, Coach, you're a performance coach. It's hard to be on top of your game year end, day after day. It's not just on the weekends you got to show up. You got to show up at the practice tracks, because if you practice slow, you end up going slow. And that's something that you helped teach me transitioning to the silly bicycle world, is if I'm constantly training slow, well, it's like impossible for me to go fast, because my body's just like, okay, here we go, another day at the office, we're just gonna go slow. So you got to have the mix of it.
Well, you bring up something that's really interesting, because when you look at success, everybody looks at success when it's at the pinnacle, and they're looking at the output, having no understanding of what the input consisted of. When you look at Jet, the first time he won a championship, with the exception of understanding what Hunter did going to the MXGPs, nobody was talking about Jet. And Davies on public record saying, hey, look, everything we did wrong with Hunter, we corrected with Jet, and the rest is history. So it doesn't matter. You could look at Bezos, right? Started the company in 99. It's worth $250 billion. You look at Elon Musk, started his company 9 years later. It's worth $254 billion. So when you look at the idea that we all look at the outcome and go, oh, wow, look, must be nice to be Johnny Hopper. He's got a successful channel. He's got 57,000 subscribers. Well, that didn't happen overnight. They haven't seen the 20-hour days that you've put in. They haven't seen you. You've been very kind to share some of your issues.
We don't
that
have
you
to
went
keep
through.
using me as an example.
Well, I think you have to, because thanks to you being dedicated. You've got a little one last week where she was sick. You still made time for the show. That's discipline. There's certainly other things that you could have done to try to get your day started. People don't realize the time change difference, right? Because you open up today's show by saying how early it is. People don't realize all that goes in. But that's what's awesome about success is when you look at the success that you've had. I've had great conversation with Jace with Gypsy Tales. When he picked us up in Australia the first time that we did a podcast with him, I just asked him, I said, man, how did you learn all this? And he goes, man, there's this new university out there. It's unbelievable. It's called YouTube. I was like, are you kidding me? He's like, no, I've learned everything I know on YouTube on how to use these mixing boards and sounds and speakers and everything else. And again, nobody sees the input. We only see the output. Jace has had his studio burned down. Jace has moved. He's got a place in Dubai. He's got a place in California. And I know the amount of work that we put in just being able to get on the podcast with him and how much he has to move around. He's newly married, but we only see, hey, he gets these interviews with Tomac. He gets these interviews, that are very difficult to get. Well, how much work goes into it? We only get to enjoy the output. And that's what I'd like to say to you today is that's where the discipline comes from is there's a lot of content. You look at, I found a video that popped up last night on my feed when you came out and visited us at Western and you were videotaping and then, you were on the bike and there was videotaping and, I got 9,000, almost 10,000 views on that. But you took the time to come out, visit audio, you videoed, you edit it, you put it up. So the most successful people in the world, people have no idea on the input. We only look at the output and go, oh, it must be nice to be Sexton and making that kind of money or Jet. Not looking.
Yeah. Back to Jace for a little while, like, this quote by Art.
Yes, I love
It
that.
took 5 years to become an overnight success. Like talking with Jace at the last couple of rounds, he just was so relieved because he finally was seeing some of the fruit to what he's been pushing out there with struggling for so long. Because, I'm a big finance guy, and when I talked to him at his studio, I was like, dude, you're young, you're just getting married, like this is what you should be doing. And he's like, Johnny, I can't. And I'm like, I hate that word. What do you mean you can't? And he's going, because everything I fucking make goes into this. And I stopped for a second there, and it was just like successful people are going to do things that other people are unwilling to do. And I just looked at Jason, I was like, dude, this is panning out, and
well, look at this, Johnny. If anybody who's listening stops and thinks about, if you were to ask me to critique where your priorities are at, I just ask to look at two things: your checkbook and your calendar, because that tells me where your priorities are at. Take Jace, for example. If you look at his calendar, he's either getting something in the can, working on getting somebody to show up, editing. He's got a big crew that he has to help manage to, extrapolate what he wants. And then at the same time, reinvesting everything back into the company that he keeps making. That's what we always say. Look at where people spend their time and their money, and that tells you everything you need to know about their priorities.
No, that makes perfect sense. And just being I guess maybe humble for a little bit. Like I'm super impressed with what he's done, but I was a little jealous because I saw him at the MotoGP race this last weekend, and I've been trying to get there, and I talk with a lot of the world champions, and we briefly. It's not like we're friends or anything. You're all acquaintances type stuff, and I was just like, damn, so it was something to build towards there. And I'm super proud of him because you have to be happy for your friends. But again, it goes back to this thing, right? It took 5 years to become an overnight success, right? Looking at an overnight success, you're going, this person has everything, blah, 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 blah. And little caveat to that, look at Ken Roxon. He's got a separated shoulder and he was winning the race. If it would have been a triple crown, he probably would have won at least one of that race that he was out front in. I believe that shoulder got sore and he just wasn't able to keep because that track was incredibly beat up. But then, I'm looking at the Martinator, the defending MotoGP champs, Instagram, and he's talking with Ken Roxon. And so I'm like, all right, midnight rolls around. They're in Seattle, Washington. Ken Roxon gets on a red eye to go to Texas, to go in the middle of nowhere, to go to the MotoGP race the next day. I'm going, would he rather be at home chilling? Probably. but here's another commitment. And I thought that was interesting. Again, it's just those things that look at their calendar, look at what they got
Yeah.
going on.
Well, if you talk to any successful entrepreneur, right? Again, go back to Bezos, go back to Musk, all of those guys. They say at the very, very top of the spear, their favorite word is no. They're not available. They can't do a meeting. No, they're not going to take a small phone call because they realize the value of time, and you've got to be able to leverage time. And we all have the same 24 hours, and it's just amazing what people are able to do. I like Bezos' story, just like I like Uber's story, right? Bezos, he had a fascination with books. He had them in his garage. He was just starting a shipping company. And I was talking to somebody who actually, he's one of the top writers. His dad actually flies for UPS. And they said right now that Amazon represents, like if you froze a parcel of time, like right now, I think, don't hold me to the exact percentage, but it was pretty big. It's like 36% of the total packages being moved around the world at any given time is by Amazon. Stop and think about that. Of all packages being moved, 30+% are all Amazon. And that
Well,
started
dude,
in a garage with an idea.
so a fun little tidbit about me is like, the saying, a day late, dollar short.
Mm-hmm.
That was literally my father. So there's this successful dealership here in Colorado, and my dad had a plan to buy out this Honda dealership, and this was before I was born, and he just couldn't come up with a deposit, and he finally came up with a deposit, but it was a day past when they said they were going to hold it for him, and he lost it,
Mm.
and that dealership ended up becoming the biggest motorcycle dealership here in Colorado. And it was a bummer. But
Yeah.
going full circle, as I got older, I kept thinking like this dealership needs to kind of somewhat turn into more of a warehouse online broker, like, yeah, you're selling bikes, but you don't they would hardly stock anything, and ordering stuff would take 4 weeks. And I think that's on main. I think that is the consensus of most brick and mortar motorcycle shops these days.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention in the fucking recession we've been in, and with Biden, and then now goddamn Trump's tariffs. I was telling you how frustrated I am at at those, because not that, but like this just not knowing anything, you just can see that fucking shit just goes down.
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward.
um,
That's what I love about economics. It's all zeros and ones, whether you like them or not.
yeah, yeah, and emotions, that's kind of the whole thing. So
Mm-hmm.
with AI and whatnot, the people that are programming stuff are still gonna be humans. So, anyway, what I'm saying is, when you went to a shop and you try to order anything,
Mm-hmm.
well, it would be like, okay, it's gonna be here in 3-4 weeks. Well, that's not good enough. Well, now what you were saying about Bezos, dude, I broke my buddy's pipe the last time I rode his bike. I ended up wadding his bike, and broke his FMF pipe. Well, I called the dealership. They're like, "Hey, Johnny, we'll give you a 20% discount." I'm like, "Sweet." And they asked me how much it was, and it was like $1,300. And I was like, hold on." So then I just went on Amazon and I got it for $1,300, but it was here the next day.
The next day. Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing. But now going forward, this dealership now is sold to somebody else. And then there's another
Mm.
dealership here in Colorado that is selling out to somebody else,
Yeah.
So
Well, the hard part about business, it doesn't matter. Like for myself, being in a service-based business, you got to think about, there was a day that I'd be out at the track, 8 in the morning, and be at the track till 8 in the evening, and you might work with 5 or 6 riders. Then tomorrow morning, you got to get back out to the track and do it again. And if you went to the gym and you worked with somebody, or you did facilitated stretching, or whatever you do in the different facets of our business. But now with digital, we're doing it right now, right? You've got Zoom meetings. You've got the ability to record phone calls. You've got the ability to, we say it once, sell it 1,000 times. It didn't exist at this level, not even 10, 15 years ago. So um, if you don't, like you said, when you look at something like Amazon, I was sitting in my office at 7 in the morning, I ordered a few things for the office and dumb stuff like Post-its, pens, some printer paper. I put the order in at 7. It was at my front door at noon. And it was free shipping because it was over whatever it was, $100, $200, whatever it is. And you're just
It's
like,
wild.
it is
Wild.
crazy. But here we are talking about it on a public podcast based on convenience, the ability to adapt, leveraging time, and being willing to come up with something that is unique. Uber,
Well,
think about how unique that
what's
is.
funny is like, okay, there's my wife sent me a meme that was like, your parents told you never to talk to a
Strangers.
stranger,
Yep.
and then, never get in a car with a stranger, and then
Never
also
get in a
like
car.
never talk to somebody on the internet. And what do? We order a stranger from the internet to get in a car here. Well, this gentleman was saying like, hey, let everyone else charge tariffs while we take a backside. And okay, just some clarification. My problem with what's going on is I think it's good, but what he's trying to do is he's trying to get, where the fuck is the 10-year? Where did I have the 10-year? 4 point. I had it up here.
Here's a perfect example.
Yeah. Trump,
software that people can go and do this. It's amazing.
yeah. Trump is trying to get the 10-year, which is this is our interest rates, basically. Not the Fed interest rates, but this is what everyone's mortgage and refinance your debt and everything. Trump is trying to use tariffs to tank the sucker back down to a couple years ago, so that he can refinance the trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that we have as a country, which I think is great. My problem is that in order to do it, he's tanking the entire market with the art of the deal. I don't necessarily think anything is going to stick hardcore, but I do like the idea of reciprocal tariffs. But what he's doing is tanking everything to force Jerome Powell to cut rates, and Powell is not fucking doing it. And that's the thing that I have a problem. And I've been front running the market, so it's shame on me, but that's the answer.
Okay.
It is good, but the short-term pain is really, 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 really sucks at the moment. But about
And by the way, I do agree with Will 100%, and I couldn't agree with him more. Anything in life is worth having, but it's never easy. And man, that is so true. I love that. So I hope I didn't give the impression that I disagreed with what Will's saying, because I agree 100%. In fact, I've pissed off a lot of people just because I've been doing this since 1986, and like you say, people only see the outcome side of it, and I'm going to stop there because I could go down some personal things that nobody really cares about. But yeah, I agree with you 100%, brother.
oh, some of the comments, man, I think are getting pretty funny.
But Johnny, I do want to interrupt you on this. This is what I love about your chat room, though. People can agree to disagree, and nobody wants to try to chop everyone's nose off. Nobody wants to just, F you, Johnny, I'm leaving. I love the fact that you create an environment that people can disagree with you. I love that. I like that somebody can say to me they disagree with maybe something that I've said. They're not just calling me an asshole and then leaving. And I want to commend you on that. And I commend everybody who's listening and in the chat room. That's cool. We can agree to disagree, but just like you've done, Johnny, give me a little bit more context on your opinion. And I love the way that the chat room's giving their opinion on things. Everybody brings experience. Hopefully there's knowledge that comes with that experience. But yeah, I love this. I love the idea that people can disagree. It's like liking Deegan or not liking Deegan, liking Sexton or not liking Sexton, saying he's a choker, he's not a choker. But nobody in here is just calling a I think, Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's only been 2 people you've had to essentially block out of the chat room that just became just belligerent, like completely irrelevant, but correct me if I'm wrong. We've been doing this now for a couple of years, and I think it's only been a couple people total that you've had to
people can say whatever they say about me, but whenever I bring on guests and then people are really rude to them, that's where I draw the line. And then we all know I have issues with a certain somebody, but that goes further back here. But the biggest story, like I say on my thumbnail, was not that Cole Davies won, but that Deegan lost. and he lost to his teammate. And
Mhm.
he had the black and white stripe
That was
suit, which I
awesome.
thought was great, and then he had
Yep.
the bright orange jumpsuit, which I think, looking at his YouTube channel, that came from a viewer, which was
Mm.
posted. And so I don't know if it was his organic idea. I think it was the community's idea. So that's just great that he was able to add on to that.
How insane that Thor could get that put together in 7 days. I mean,
Well,
if you
for
know
he was the
manufacturing
first
at
in
all,
line to do that.
yeah, but think about that from a manufacturing standpoint. All how hard it is to get that stuff. And I know all the pros have new stuff every weekend, but think about the logistics of that. Because that gear is laid out what these guys are going to ride 6, 8 weeks in advance, if not longer. I'd love to talk to JT Money about
Well,
that.
no, talking to a couple of the gear guys at the races, dude,
Hmm.
these guys, they don't have the stuff that we go buy. Like
Right.
they have special, like Barsha, for instance. We all know his pants are incredibly tight. Well, that's because he's got measurements to make them incredibly tight. And
Right.
it's not so much that he just wants to show off his ass. Like there's an actual scientific reason as to why um, he has that. Is like you see a lot of guys on the gate and they
Pulling.
start pulling up their pants. And you're like,
Yep.
why are you dragging your junk? But what they're doing is they're pulling those pants up to make them tight on their ass, because when the gate drops, there's so much inertia that if they have an inch or so of slack, it's going to scoot them back, and that's going to create, at least as a professional, maybe an amateur, you wouldn't notice this, but sliding back just a half of an inch is enough to get your balance off to where that you're not going to get a good start. So you'll see Sexton next time you guys are at the races. The TV coverage might not show it, but most of the guys will literally pull their pants to try to make the slack underneath their ass from their seat, make it taut. But
Yep.
this was, give it up to Vital. They've got a banger here with Julian Beaumer, but he's talking about Deegan. And this is the cool thing about Deegan, is that he's just constantly working. It's not that he's just showing up to race. He's promoting himself and getting in other people's heads on and off the track, right? It's a game. And he's just a master class at doing this at 19. Okay, so listen to what Juju has to say.
He's been DMing me for like 2 weeks.
What are we saying in the DMs?
He texted me the other day. He deleted it now. I got a screenshot of it though. He texted me. He said, "Good morning, legend. hope you practiced in the ruts."
Oh, that's less friendly.
But I like that they're all giggling about it. But just the fact that Deegan is out there just, hey, don't forget about me. Don't forget about me. Don't forget about me. And then what happens with him running into Juju on the track? Yeah, like, it's for a podium position. And the thing that the context is, Juju just thought that Deegan was coming just to bang bars with him, and that was it. Little did he realize that you got Shimoda almost ran him off the track 3 different times during the race. So Deegan was hot and bothered, and he was like, dude, I need to just keep going, going, and going. Whether or not he likes Juju or not, I think the number plate has nothing to do with it, or the name on the back of the jersey. It was just, hey, he was coming through and he saw an opportunity and he was fairly nice about it. But then they had words after the fact. I think Deegan was the first guy. I believe Juju was the first guy to grab Deegan's helmet. And then that's when Deegan decided to kind of bitch slap Juju, which I think is funny. And Coach, we're around a lot of sports, okay? Mountain bike, GNCC, off-road hare scramble type stuff, cycling, and moto and supercross. And moto and supercross, dude, I see a lot of just like petty shit, from local tracks to national tracks to all sorts of stuff. And it might not be on par with the kind of shit that I see like in cycling, and even triathlon. They might be like the most uppity, worst people ever. But if you were to bitch slap somebody, almost in those other two-wheel sports, it would for sure be a fine, and even if it was just a soft little itty bitty thing, somebody would go tell, oh no, man, like, and could you imagine if this was like the NBA, you'd just be, oh, and like fall over.
I was gonna say, if it was soccer, Beaumer would like throw himself off the bike and wiggle like a worm, and oh my gosh, I think my neck is broke. That would be soccer, right? Or like you say, the NBA with LeBron barely gets touched, and he acts like he's just been completely kneed right in the face.
Juju got a fine.
Oh, did he really? For what? Grabbing the helmet?
They both got fined. Okay, I need to look
because what they get fined
penalty report is not up yet. The penalty report doesn't come out till like fucking Thursday.
Well, where's Cody and these guys finding that out? That's interesting. Because obviously
they might be more up on consuming content than
that's
me,
cool.
And somebody might have said something about it, but maybe it's only a $500 fine or something. Okay, all right. Well then,
but where's the fine stem from? Because what happened when Jet grabbed Anderson's helmet? Did they get fined?
I believe they did get fined. I believe Anderson got fined for that.
Okay, but see, that's what's interesting. And I don't know the answers. I'm reaching out to the chat room here. If you look at the fact that Jet got into Jason's face, and then Jet grabs Jason, right? And then Jason got fined. Is that because of what happened I'm trying to figure out where the fine would come from. But like, where would there be a fine? And Juju he was very open. He said, look, I left the door open and Deegan filled it. After the race, you can hear the audio when Deegan says, hey, I was nice to you. Don't ever show my number again, right? So you can tell that was completely based on don't do what you did. But where would there be a fine on that? Because that certainly was the most ginger face slap I've ever seen in a helmet in my life. I mean, Moto Memes is going to have a heyday with that one where it's just like, stop it.
Coach, I think it's more of a the fine is so petty that it's usually if you want to correct a behavior, you have to have it. If somebody's at a 10, the correction needs to be at a 10, right? Mm-hmm. But for these guys, let's just say that this slap was a 10. Okay. Even though we all know it wasn't. The fine that they get, I highly doubt is $5,000. I bet it's $500.
That's the number I had.
After that, it's like that's a 1 compared to the 10. So are they going to do it again? Yeah. And as a Feld company, right, where they want to use the content, that's perfect. They don't want to inhibit the guys to do this. They just don't want anyone to get crazy hurt. But
think about it. In any other sport, even that little, ginger tap across the face, that would have been a full-on brawl. I mean, you saw it at the arena cross, right? When those two guys were like, I don't remember who the two riders were. They were beating the living snot out of each other on the ground, full throw punches. I don't know. Just to me, I was really surprised. And I'm going to kind of stir the stink pot, Johnny. You ready for this one? You're going to hate me for this. All right. So Deegan puts that little gentle slap across Beaumer, and Beaumer just completely pounces on him. Who wins the fight? If nobody intervenes, who wins between Beaumer and Deegan?
I kind of want to say Deegan wins.
Do you really?
Yeah.
I think as juiced up as Beaumer. I mean, you look at how big his head's gotten and how hyper lean he's gotten. I think Beaumer would have the better end of him. I don't think that
these guys are saying $1,000. Even if it's $1,000, that's
for a guy that's going to make 75,000 or 50 grand for a weekend win. Yeah, Saturday night win.
Yeah. No, but it would have been more entertaining to see Juju just jump on Deegan, because if anything else, it would tell Deegan, hey, don't fuck with this guy, because that would be a way for Juju, because as quiet as Juju is, he's not as loud of a personality as Deegan. So what could his strength be to stop the damage of the psychological shit? Because when I'm at the tracks, I see Deegan going around the track during practice, and just once somebody passes, like Juju, once Juju passes him, he just dumps the throttle as he's going by, just to break the concentration of Juju on a fast lap.
Yeah.
And so,
Rich has a good point, though. If Deegs has trained jujitsu with his dad, then that would be interesting because that would mean there'd be some good fighting there. So again, I maybe I would be forced to eat my words, but it would definitely be interesting. And I'm just surprised that that didn't go down. I really was. Maybe not right there immediately, but you saw Deegan kept pointing like, "Let's go to the parking lot and let's figure this out." He points to the parking lot like 3 times.
well, again, in my experiences, there's so many people around these guys that these
Yeah.
guys can literally say and do whatever they want and know
Mhm.
that somebody's going to break it up,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
that's just the sport we're in. But if this was MotoGP or F1, there would have been points taken away. It
Yeah.
would have been a much bigger fine for sure.
Well, and Art brings it up here, and I can't remember who it was, and I'm feeling bad because he's a super cool dude. The one that got in, just beat the living snot out of Vince Freezy in that right-hand turn where Vince came in and took him out. It's the fly guy, Weston Pike. Remember when Weston just unloaded? That's kind of what I would have expected for Beaumaire. If Deegan's going to try to run his mouth and then gently put his face up against your helmet, to me it would be on like Donkey Kong, because what did your dad teach you when you were a kid? The bully's just going to get worse until you just punch him straight in the face. And I do agree with you. If you want to nip this in the bud and make a statement, Johnny, like you said, it's on right then and there. It would have been on. And let's face it, what your dad always tell you, don't throw the first punch, but finish it. Well, in all intents and purposes, Deegan put his hand on his face first. So like my dad would have been disappointed in me if I had not pounced on him.
And what I've been taught is if you're the smaller of the two guys, you don't fight fair. That's just what you do. And when it comes to whenever I see fights with dirt bikes, and guys are always throwing fists at helmets. Like look at Weston Pike versus Freeze. Why in the fuck would you be throwing haymakers at somebody that's wearing a helmet? Right? Like you're going to do more damage to your hand. Like you have steel toe boots. Okay. There's other things that you could do if you really try to hurt somebody. So, but again, I don't think people are really trying to hurt people. And also, most dirt bike riders are either fairly small, and two, they're not trained fighters. So,
And Ray is actually correct. I am incorrect because Juju put his hands on Deegan's helmet first, and then that's when Deegan said, "Hey, don't put your hands on my helmet." So you're right. Absolutely, you're right, Ray. Yeah, that's interesting. And again,
it's funny how that's the story. It's not Cole Davies at 17 years old who's led the most laps of anybody, I think, in the history of Supercross as a rookie.
And what he win by like 9 seconds, Sean.
Yeah.
It was huge. I mean, it was an absolute beatdown.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said on my live show, Coach, when I was at the last Triple Crown that I went to in Glendale, the whoops were torn to pieces and everybody was jumping through them. Well, Cole would come around and lift his front wheel up, get back, and he had the biggest balls of anybody. I don't know if it's his cookies or what, but
I said the same thing to Michaela. If you watch the 450s, Sexton was doubling through, not Webb. Webb's always been known to double through the whoops, right? Sexton was going through, and just 15 minutes earlier, you had Cole Davies just blitzing them. So I agree with you. And I'd correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I guess that statement wouldn't matter. I was going to say, I don't think they prepped the whoops at all. If they had, maybe they would have blitzed them, but it wasn't like the condition of the whoops were any worse than what Cole Davies had, especially the first couple of laps, because he did it all the way to the end of the race. But and this question has come up in your chat room quite a bit, Johnny, and I'm interested in this. If Deegan, I don't think he is, but if Deegan were to stay 250 another year, do you think that Cole gets pushed out of Star? Or do you think it's perfect timing that Deegan's going to go 450? I think he's going to go 450 outdoors. So if he goes 450 outdoors, then obviously they're in different classes. No harm. But what are your thoughts in regards to the territory of that?
This would be the perfect year for him to go 450 outdoors. I don't know Well, Hunter and Jet might both be back,
for
but
outdoors.
for outdoors.
Yeah, I think you'll see both of them there.
And Tomac, he might be back for some SMX stuff, but
Well,
you know,
yeah. Go ahead. Excuse me.
so and I do think that Deegan is honestly a better moto dude than he is a supercross dude, just because
100%.
he's young and he hasn't had as much time to really master the craft of supercross, even though he's super fast. But there's been guys that are proven that are faster than him, like Cole Davies, for instance, you know. And Deegan has, like, when I saw his mugshot report, they said, okay, this guy's 5'6", 5'7", and he was like 155 pounds. And so I was like, well, okay, for context, I'm 5'9", I'm 150 pounds. So I was like, this dude's literally got more muscle mass than I do. You know, so I was like, okay, so therefore my way of thought goes, kind of the perfect weight for a 250 is right around that 150. A 450 is at 165 or so.
Yeah.
And with Brian Deegan, I'm sure he would be able to gang on 10 pounds in a couple months, you know.
Yeah.
And we could debate how, just whatever you do to get there, if he just goes to in and out, or, you know, blank other stuff.
Think about how ideal that is, though, Johnny. Because think about Yamaha right now. If Coop wins his championship, he gets a renewal of his contract and double the salary. That's just norm, right? So Tomac is now wondering, does he have a spot? That's why there's rumor he's going to Ducati, and it's a pretty solid rumor. He's on the short list now because Yamaha's landscape is changing dramatically. You know, Yamaha doesn't want to let go of Deegan. We know Sexton's already signed with Kawasaki. I don't see Deegan going to KTM. I don't see that being his environment, so to speak. We know Anderson's not going to go to KTM. Anderson now makes more sense going to Triumph, even though Bobby's not there. But think about the Yamahas this summer. If, let's say, hypothetically, let's just say that Tomac is able to race. You got Jay Coop, who's racing really, really well. Christian Craig is not setting the world ablaze. He's only a couple rounds back. We'll be very curious to see. And then you've got possibly Deegan racing 450 outdoors. Now, all of a sudden, Yamaha wants to keep Deegan, so 450 ride. Cooper Webb gets an automatic renewal, so there's two guys guaranteed. Justin Cooper's riding well. I don't know that he stays at Yamaha. I mean, his inventory value, his real estate value is going up with every race, right? He's consistently up front. Now, I did get into some text messages over the weekend, and it was brought to my attention, yeah, some of the top dogs are not in. Would Jay Coop still be in the top 3? I don't know. I mean, without him being there, it's very easy to be an armchair quarterback on Monday morning, literally. But when you look at the musical chairs of Tomac going to Ducati, you've got Anderson going to Triumph. You've got now a vacancy there sitting at KTM, not only because Sexton goes to Cowie. Now think about what that Outdoor Nationals looks like this summer. Because it's amazing when we get halfway through the summer, we forget all about Supercross. I mean, remember that summer when Tomac and Sexton were just light years ahead of everybody else? No one was talking about Supercross.
Honestly, I think it's a great plan. And here's why. How many people remember you for your 250 championship? Okay. You know, you got the Martin brothers, right?
Yep. Everybody in the 450 class, Johnny. Everyone in the 450 class. Every factory rider was a 250 champion. And we don't talk about any of it. I mean, you see how Ferrandis has kind of been blown off by the podcast or the broadcast. And remember when he got taken out by, or Christian Craig took out Ferrandis? That was the most talked about thing for a couple of weeks. And Ferrandis started in what? I think 3rd or 4th. He had a really good start in the main, and nobody was talking about his championship.
This is my prediction, Coach.
Okay.
I think Deegan has a master plan. And he's already won the little bikes outdoors. He hasn't won indoors. You know, yeah, he's the SMX champ, but he's not a Supercross champ yet. So, boom. Those are like, sweet. You get that. I got the championship, sweet. But what's the real bread and butter of our sport? It's the premier class. It's the 450s. And being 19, you have Jet, who's very well established at arguably pretty close to the same age. I think he's what, 21 now? 20?
Something like that. Someone in the chat room will let us know.
Yeah, I think he's 20 or maybe 21, maybe. And I don't think Deegan is going to have an incredibly long career. I think he's coming in and his goal is to win as much as he can, but I think he's going to have sort of the career of the other major influencers of the sport, Ryan Villapoto, Dungy, and Carmichael, and even Stewart, where this magical 26 is kind of the retirement year. But lately, we've been seeing a lot of guys in their 30s,
Tomac is
Roxon,
a good one.
Anderson, Tomac, and Barsha, and Malcolm, like the list goes on and on and on. I just don't believe Deegan is going to be that guy. So for him moving to the 450s first to get his feet wet and maybe win, I think is beautiful because he's coming in here to just win championships and get into the record books, not for being the world's biggest 250 guy. Because honestly, we see it time and time again that being in the 250 class hinders you when you stay in it. Look at the Martin brothers. Those guys are fast as fuck, right? But it did not help them sell themselves for a big 450 ride. And then the most noticeable guy is what's happening on Triumph right now with Faulkner. Like he had his opportunity, but he stayed in the 250 class. Look at, honestly, a little bit of Adam Cincerillo. He, I think, stayed in the 250 class too long, and that hindered his progression in the 450s. When you're hot, that's when you move.
Yeah, but you've got a lot to unpack right there. Number one, if there's no available spots to go to in the 450 class, you have to stay. And then the second thing is the number of injuries. Think about Jeremy Martin. He had that. He was the next heir apparent to that 450 Honda ride. I mean, he led all the way up to the last couple laps at Daytona. He showed that he was there, and then he had that back injury. And then you go through each one of them like AC, right? AC, yeah, he didn't close the deal on that West Coast Championship. He lost it on the last lap. But to your point, it's like there was no place for him to go at Cowie at the time in the 450 ranks until that musical chair opened up. So like with Jeremy Martin, remember, he got mocked incessantly because he said that he was at the airport, he had a family emergency, when really he just didn't want to point out because there was no ride for him. And that's why, and I know that we see this quite a bit in the chat room, who would want to voluntarily make yourself unemployed? And you bring up a really good point with McElrath, right? They're passing McElrath, and I'm thinking, man, remember when he was the top guy in the 250 class? But the musical chairs didn't open up where there was an opportunity for him to go into a new ride at a 450 level.
Yeah, that's why, like, once the fire is hot, you gotta.
But where would you go if there's no two 450s? You're the hottest guy, but there's no place to go. 450 wise.
Well,
they're going to stay and make 400 grand on a 250.
I mean, okay, then that's a dynamic of the sport. That's the problem.
That's the problem.
He doesn't have that problem. He will never have that problem as long as he continues to be in the spotlight about stuff, whether it's getting arrested or slapping somebody off track. Like, this is all about showmanship.
You bring up something that I wanted to ask you about. Look at Deegan's podium speech last week and then look at his antics this week. Remember when he was very stoic? Everyone's like, whoa, where'd Deegan go? He didn't smile, very short answers. Like JT Money couldn't get him to talk. You're like, okay, well, best of luck, see you in the main, right? Yeah. And then all hell broke loose with getting arrested. And now we see his dynamic personality coming back a week later. Pretty interesting, stark contrast in what we saw on the podium when you stop and you think about it.
No, I agree. And maybe there's a little more to that because of, what I asked him in Arlington as far as the transition of, I personally, I think Deegan is a wild child, right? I mean, his nickname is literally Danger. Yeah. And he's got the chains, he's got the persona, and he's got the stardom in this sport because the sport's very small, but he is literally the most popular dude of 450s and 250s. I believe without a doubt. Right. Yeah. And I would say over Tomac and them. I know that's wild, but there is more young people coming up than there are guys like me that are in their 30s that are all for God Tomac, right? Like, if you're a hardcore fan, you're a huge Tomac fan. But if you're a young kid, and social media and blah blah blah, you're a Deegan fan, and there's just more of the younger generation coming up here. So,
well, think about it. I mean, a YouTube channel that has 1.3 million followers. I
is
mean, and
honestly
think
pretty small, Coach. In
it
this,
is,
in this,
it is,
but
but
in this
on
space, it is huge.
that's what I was going to say. Relevant to the size of our sport, it's pretty enormous. It reminds me of the first time I walked through the Altamont Mall here in Central Florida, and I remember seeing Fox in a surf shop, and I was like, Fox. You know, when I was growing up, everybody had JT gear. Remember the rainbow, and they had Brock Lover, Mark Barnett, Howard Tennant. Well, Barnett was a Fox guy, but you know, remember when they would have the ads, and it was all the Yamaha guys and all the Honda and the Cowie guys, and they, you know, 2-page spread. And I remember, you know, at that time, if you had Fox, it was like, yeah, it was nice. It was new gear, but it was just not as good as JT. You know, that's just the way that I felt. And I remember walking in the mall, and I remember seeing Fox for the first time. And I remember thinking, wow, our sport, at least from that product standpoint, is starting to get into a new market. That's the way I see Deegan. Deegan has kids that are sitting in school that are nothing but Xbox heroes that know who Deegan is. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue with that kind of success and penetration of a brand. Danger Boy, and now, like you say, adding the arrest to it and everything else. So,
And it's just a minor thing. And honestly, like it's kind of laughable though, right? Because if you had Cody Shock, you know, or if you had Logan Carnow or somebody else get arrested and then show up in an orange jumpsuit, it would almost like the taste would be bad. You'd be like, what kind of publicity stunt is this?
right.
But with Deegan, for some reason, the narrative is just different. It's just like everyone is fucking A, man. Like, you go, right?
Yeah.
And it's because of the platform and his persona that he's built. And it's Danger Boy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
think about when James Stewart, remember, he got injured, and this was one of the things that pissed off a lot of fans. Remember, they went down to Miami, and Red Bull has that, they build that real tall wooden, and you create some kind of a contraption, and you try to fly off of it, and they measure how far you go. And people were pissed because James wasn't out racing, but he was down here at this Red Bull thing, flying this handmade airplane off this platform. And people are like, man, if you can do something like that that's inherently dangerous, why can't you be back racing your dirt bike? And that started quite a distinct taste in a lot of people's mouths, including Kawasaki. Kawasaki was not happy. Or excuse me, he couldn't have been with Cowie then because he was a Red Bull rider. That must have been when he was what, San Manuel? Is because when he was with Cowie on the 125, he was not Red Bull. He didn't get Red Bull until he went to San Manuel, I believe. Because think back to the pictures. You never saw James Stewart on the 259 with a Red Bull helmet. It was Fox head to toe.
no.
Yeah.
No.
So that's the type of stuff, like you say, when you get to this certain level, like James Stewart impersonating a police officer, and people are like, yeah, I shouldn't have done it, but he's a star, so we're going to blow it off. You look at J-Law, you know, taking the rental car, going out on the racetrack, you know, almost killing people, going through the pits drunk, you know, with his agent, flying up and down the pits and getting arrested for that. Sam Manuel, awesome. Thanks, Will. So, you know, that's the problem that we run into. And you said it earlier, and you said it best. These kids get so many people that are just little yes men around them. You know, they really can't wipe their own nose. Everybody's got to do it for them, and nobody wants to ruffle their feathers, because if you ruffle their feathers, you get fired. And this is a very dangerous, not dangerous, it's a tad bit annoying, to be honest with you, because it's like when you look at all the people that are working so hard for that athlete to be successful, and then if the athlete's not successful, what's the first thing they do, Johnny? They blame everybody in the immediate circle that's trying to help them. Suspension sucks, the wheels suck, the bike sucks, the chassis
going
sucks.
for the races, I see a lot of prima donna shit go on. And probably the biggest thing of being at the races is how small it is. Like on TV and everything, we look like this is the big deal. But honestly, the best somewhat analogy or comparison I can have with it is, you know, your local District 25 or whatever motocross club. It's really no different at the professional level. Right. Everybody knows everybody. There's cliques, and that's just how it functions, you know. And that was pretty eye-opening to me, as I just was like, Okay. So this stuff is it's a little bit more professional, but there's still a lot of like the little politics and stuff go on here. And back to the little Deegan,
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue to see this kind of behavior, you know, and is it distasteful? Well, it depends on your context of what you think. If your kid is looking up to somebody and they want to go do donuts and get arrested, yes, right. But if you're looking in the context of selling tickets and just like, hey, this person just gives no fucks and he's on the top of the world, he's one in a billion type deal. Well, it's different, but it is entertainment. So if you put it in the context of entertainment, boom. And I think there's going to be some sort of a dynamic shift between Deegan going out on his own as he gets older, because he's a young adult at this stage now. And yes, his parents have done a really good job of instilling family values, but they're also entertainers, right?
Yeah.
And I think people try to portray Deegan as this is truly who he is, when I think you got to think of it as more of like this is what he does for money rather
Yeah.
than actually like who he is as an individual. But
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue to see some of these antics continue.
Let me ask you this, Johnny. Go back to the early 90s and let's compare Deegan against who. If you go back to Rick Johnson being the bad boy and you had David Bailey that was clean cut, super professional. I mean, RJ's gear always looked killer. David Bailey's gear always looked killer, but two distinct personalities. Who would be the today's day and age? If Deegan is Ricky Johnson, who's David Bailey in today's against Deegan?
Against
Personality to person. See, that's what I was wondering. Cole Davies,
yeah,
or even like Bo Mayer. Bo Mayer doesn't talk a lot of shit. You know?
No, that's why like I was wanting Bo Mayer to do a little bit more, because Bo Mayer is an incredibly passionate and professional individual. And the sad thing, the biggest thing I see about this stuff is these guys are not prepared for the spotlight that they get. Okay.
Mhm.
Because motocross and supercross is a very intrinsic, self-centered sport. And once you become a professional and you have all these cameras and these highlights and everybody wants your autograph and whatnot, it's hard to cope with that stuff, especially with how cruel the internet is. With you do one thing wrong and that stuff will just tear you up, because you know, as human history goes, the lone wolf dies while the pack survives. For the last 200,000 years, we've learned how to be hunters and gatherers. Like, we need to be in a group that we socialize with. So if you have a big stake of people talking bad about you, it's hard to deal with. So how do you prepare these guys for this? And they are just out of their league when it comes to dealing with Deegan on that level. They're comparable on the track. Off the track, they've got no dog in the fight.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest discrepancy I see with those guys. And with Davies, long-winded answer, Coach. Davies, sweet kid, and he's starting to branch out, and you can't really say anything bad about him because he doesn't do anything that's negative, and he's just always this highlight of just a bubble of some. He's like a husky, right? You just want to just be around him. You know, he's a cool dude.
Well, I like what Jace told him. He said, look, stop trying to act a certain way for the camera. Just be yourself. Jace talked about that in his Gypsy Tales podcast. And I think it shows. I think if you look at the very first time Cole was up there, even Daniel Blair, his mentor at the time, was like, we got to work on the speaking skills. But to your point exactly, if all of a sudden you find yourself on a podium and you weren't anticipating it, of course, you're not interviewing yourself in the mirror and getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and with JT Money or whoever the pit reporter is that may be interviewing you. Because, you know, first place gets a different interviewer than second place than third place. You've already seen that. So it's what we call the familiarity principle. If you're not ready for what's getting thrust upon you, of course, you're going to kind of goof it up a little bit. But I think he's really heeded to what Jay said and said, let your personality come out. It's like him having that big sombrero on his head. It's just Cole just not worrying and having fun with it. And I think his podium speeches are getting better.
But the biggest thing that I see is that the crosshairs are not on Davies.
Right.
Deegan is not adamantly targeting Davies. Whether he's a teammate or what, that's the big thing. Where Deegan's crosshairs have been on Juju.
Well, and then some people could argue the idea that maybe Deegan's put the target on the wrong person, and now it's a day late and a dollar short, as you said earlier. Maybe he didn't think that Cole would be able to step up. I mean, his starts have been on the money ever since he's gone pro. Just crazy. Showing, and we talked about this. Well, you and I spoke about this. I mean, it just shows his improvement from futures to his first pro race. I mean, he just stepped right up, got the whole shot, led numerous laps, made a couple mistakes, right? But he's just showing he's got that internal grit that is what's necessary to win a championship. So maybe I don't know, maybe we do see
they're on different teams, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's some politics involved where it's, because you did see in the heat race, and I pointed this out, that Deegan ran it in hard on Davies, but kind of checked up at the last second, where if that was Juju, he would have exploded him. But he didn't, because they were teammates.
Sure.
Right. And things may change if Davies continues to beat Deegan, because Deegan's going to have to use other antics, right? You don't have to be the fastest SOB to win. You just have to put yourself in the right positions. And Deegan is a tough guy. And, look at his dad. Like, they did not get a persona, for lack of a better word, somewhat being the bully type demographic. Take that for what it is.
Sure.
And what has Deegan done in the 250 class? He's bullied these guys into kind of submission, to whether it's mentally or physically.
But you just opened up something I didn't even think about till you just articulated that. Who was Brian Deegan's biggest nemesis in the freestyle world?
I had to
Travis Pastrana. Look at the two personalities. Clean cut, all shucks, thumbs up, always smiling.
Yeah, Cole Davies.
Deegan coming out with the spikes on the chest protector, helmet, FU, like you say, no F's taken or given, rather. So you look at Brian, and Brian's like, okay, I know how to play this. We'll play the bad guy in every scenario. And like you say, and I was trying to think who was on Deegan's short list last summer. And there was somebody, and I can't put a face to it. I believe so. Thank you for helping me out. Because over the weekend, I was like, who was it that Deegan was just getting into it? They were talking smack. And then they get on the track and they would, kind of mess with each other. Then that's kind of gone away for a little bit. Kind of like the Anderson against the Lawrence brothers. That's kind of faded a little bit. Now I think Anderson's got something out for Sexton after last weekend's getting his front wheel chopped off. And like you said in your live show, thoughts and prayers to
Hymas.
Anderson.
Yeah, it was Hymas too.
Okay. So you think about now, Hymas has kind of fallen off. He's, literally he's behind, coming in with the knee injury and all that goes with it. I think there was some stink with Shimoda a little bit when he was the guy, like you said at the beginning of the show. Well, Shimoda smashed Deegan 3 times. Yeah. He was showing he's not afraid of him. And that is a really dangerous thing, because when you recognize that people are not afraid of you anymore, and you see this when somebody gets injured, goes out for a while, and then when they come back, I hate to say it, I don't want to hit a guy when he's down, but Faulkner, right? My heart bleeds for him that he had to have brain surgery. Can't imagine having your skull cut off and having your brain played with. Yeah, maybe he's coming back a little bit early. He's got a 4-year deal, so that's good at Triumph for him. But when you look at the idea that nobody's afraid of Faulkner, it used to be people are like, oh, there's Faulkner, or they knew Faulkner was coming. How quickly the tide passes, right? It's like now, if Deegan's no longer banging bars with Hymas, he's no longer banging bars with Shimoda. All of a sudden, his new guy's Beaumare. Then Beaumare shifts over to Cole Davies. It could be and I think the Cole Davies would be a moot point, because we've only got how many more rounds we have, Johnny? 6, 5, 6 more rounds, and then he's outdoors racing.
I think there's 3.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, we have another East Coast shootout this weekend.
I gotta look it up.
Yeah, I think it's an East Coast shootout.
But yeah.
which could change the whole points dynamic once again. And Cole Davies could like really get a bounce here. So that those top three, both in 450s, because I think Webb extended his lead to 11 points, so
but what's cool is like, I hate to say it, okay, but
say it anyways, Johnny. Go for it.
Yeah, well, normally I just like watching the 450s, right? Maybe it's because I ride a 450, I don't know, or it's just like this is the heavyweight class, so you're watching the heavyweight class. However, West Coast 250s, with Deegan involved, and Davies and Juju, has been amazing to watch. I haven't really dived so much into thinking it's like a 450 main event for the East Coast guys, but for the West Coast, I've been just as excited to watch the 250s main event as the 450s.
And think about this, Johnny. How much has Juju's real estate gone up going toe-to-toe with Deegan? Think about it.
Tremendously.
Tremendous. Yeah. And unfortunately, you're not hearing much about RJ Hampshire, and you're not hearing much about the East Coast guys. But what do you hear on the West Coast? Oh, Beaumare's getting into it. Even Shimoda getting into it with Deegan is way more important than Shimoda getting into it with RJ Hampshire. I mean, it's crazy. You're exactly right. The West Coast 250 is where it's at.
It's just sad. I wouldn't say it's sad, but the dynamic is a good correlation. What did how Irish UFC McGregor, god damn, what he's done for people, where it was like, call up your wife and break out the peak panties, like, you're fighting me, so you're making a shit ton of money. That's kind of what Deegan is doing for the 250 class. Yes, it's on a smaller Richter scale, but it's hard to not put that correlation together, that you're going to get more clout racing Deegan than you are Faulkner and the guys on Seth and, RJ on the East Coast.
Well, think about what Brian Deegan did for all those guys that were in Brian's immediate network when Metal Militia went big. We were giving Bezos props for creating something out of his garage, right? Think about what Brian did. Brian created an entire industry known as freestyle motocross, and then created a brand within that. And you think about it, when freestyle first came out, what was it that kind of framed as? It's the Renegades, it's the Hellraisers, it's all the ones that, but what Brian do within that? He made a lot of people in his immediate network extremely wealthy, got TV deals, got TV shows, got endorsement deals, got into some retail establishments. I mean, remember when you could get a Brian Deegan at Target as a little motorcycle? I mean, you think about the amount of money that brings in, and you think about what it takes to get that into a retail outlet like that. The only person that's done it since is with Dunge when he had the earbuds at Target. Nobody's been in mass retail like Brian. I guess Travis did, Ricky did at the time, Chad, James. And this is what Lucas Myrtle was trying.
Michael action figures. And
Myrtle's trying to do the same thing for the Lawrence brothers. That was a lot of his meetings in New York, is trying to get these little toy, because that's where the money's at. It's all the ancillary branding packages. This goes back to changing numbers. I felt like AC should have stuck with 92, just like Travis stuck with 199. Chad Reed sticking with 22. I just think from a branding standpoint, and I like AC as a person, he's a great guy, but I would have never gone from 9.
Like, look at Jeremy McGrath. Like, those were the days. Bud Light, Yamaha, #1 plate.
1-800 collect.
I've hated it ever since that guys are now sticking with numbers. Like, I prayed for Carmichael as a little kid to be like, dude, you're the fastest SOB. Like, come on, have the #1. Let's go.
But look at Donnie Hansen. Donnie Hansen would run 7 until he was #1. He'd run #1 and go back to 7. And I just think that, and you're going to see the same thing with Jet, right? If he's not running 1, he's running 18. And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Oh, you got a little one that is awake, and you actually have a couple meetings that you might be late for now. I apologize.
Yeah,
I didn't realize.
Late for one, but we've had a good conversation here, Coach.
And I want to thank everybody in the chat room. As at over 200 people, it's phenomenal. And please hit that like, and if you haven't subscribed, please do that.
Smash that
Please.
fucking like button, dude. Send the algorithm what it wants.
That's right.
It wants you to wheel tap the fucking like button. Okay.
Grab that extra gear and just start tapping.
Yeah.
I love it.
Anyway,
Well, Johnny,
Coach,
thanks for
I'm
squeezing us
sorry
in, man.
to cut you off here.
No. Appreciate it as always. And look at this. Deegan is such an impact. We didn't even talk about Cooper Webb not letting Sexton get by in the last turn with the ultimate hug the inside. Didn't even give him an inch. If he had accelerated 1 second earlier, it would have given Sexton just enough room for him to be able to come in and T-bone the snot out of him. But Webb just putting around the inside like, oh, he can't get me here. And just
Webb is
and then the shotgun back. Shotgun back. That's going to be a shitstorm.
This will be interesting. Well, Coach, I already told you that I think it's no contest for till the end of it. That Webb has, if he can somewhat stay close to Sexton in speed, he's going to beat him every time just because of sheer mental preparation.
I apologize. What's the point difference from first to second? Is it 1 point, 5 points? How much is the point difference? I apologize.
Like
I don't
right
know.
now,
No.
It's
If Sexton wins every single moto going forward and Webb is second or third for the next 6 rounds, doesn't he win?
Yeah.
Would he be able to make up an 11
25,
point?
then 22, then 20.
So it's roughly 2 points.
Yeah.
So if there's 6 rounds, I mean, it literally could come down to the last round. If Webb gets second to Sexton all the way up to the last one, he wins by what? 1 point? I'm just doing the math quick in my head. There's 6 rounds. He's 11 points down. That's 2 points, 6 rounds.
Moto Fever's got a pretty good YouTube channel too. So, hey, appreciate you joining in on the live show, brother. But yeah.
Thanks for being here, Moto. So you start thinking about it. If it's 2 points from first to second, we have 6 rounds and there's an 11-point difference. Can you imagine it comes down to the main event of the last race?
It would be awesome. It would be awesome. Like if I could write the script, that's what I would like to see, but I don't think it's going to. I think by Denver, everyone's going to be a yawner at that point. It might as well be.
You think so? Even after what you saw on Saturday night?
I think the points are going to be so different that that's what's going to happen.
Okay.
Right. Last year we got with the Achilles heel, you know, that was something exciting, but it was a bummer. But I people are thinking he's not going to win again. I think he might win again, but I think overall it's going to be Webb. But Coach,
you got to run, man, and we'll make a note because we also have to talk about the fact that Roxon beaten battered is in 3rd place, 34 points back. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the year with the 450 field
but
as
they did say
deep
that
as it is?
AC joint is not completely separated from the ligaments, which there for me tells that it's not as bad as it could be. That collarbone's just not flapping around.
What would you have predicted that at the beginning of the year with the 450 stacked as deep as it was? What we say there's like 18 guys on the gate that have number 1 in the 250 class.
No.
And he's sitting in 3rd on a Suzuki that he still has to kickstart.
Not at all.
Lots of good stuff.
Till next time, as always, keep it WFO.